It was one of those quiet Friday nights in late fall when the air smelled faintly of burning leaves and the streets were starting to empty out for the weekend. Kayla had just moved to town 2 months ago and was finally starting to feel like she fit in at her new high school. When Ava from her chemistry class invited herself over for a sleepover that weekend, Kayla didn't think twice. She figured it'd be good to hang out with someone outside of group projects and awkward lunch tables. Her parents were headed out of town for an anniversary thing and trusted her to hold the place down alone. The house was quiet after they left, just the sound of the fridge humming and the soft shuffle of slippers on hardwood. Ava showed up a little after dark with a duffel bag and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They ordered pizza, laughed at dumb TikToks, and talked about random school gossip. But every now and then, Ava would fall completely silent and just stare at the hallway behind Kayla. Not long, just a second too long. Enough to make the air feel a little heavier in the room. After a couple of hours, the air in the house started to shift. The laughter faded and a weird sort of quiet settled in. Ava was curled up on the couch flipping through TikTok, but barely reacting to anything. Kayla noticed her eyes weren't even focused on the screen. It was like she was listening for something. Every time there was a creak from the old wooden floor or a gust of wind outside, Ava's head would turn slightly, like she was expecting a knock or a voice or something worse. At around 10, Ava casually asked if Kayla's front door had a deadbolt or just the regular lock. Kayla laughed it off, said it was a pretty safe neighborhood, but her skin prickled when Ava didn't smile back, just nodded and went back to scrolling. Then she asked which window in the house was easiest to open from the outside. Her voice was flat, like she was asking about the weather. Kayla brushed it off with a nervous laugh and changed the subject. They started a movie, but Kayla couldn't focus. Ava wasn't really watching. She kept glancing at her phone like she was waiting for a message that never came. Around midnight, Ava said she needed some air and asked Kayla to walk with her. They stepped outside into the cold and stood on the porch. The wind was sharp and dry. It smelled like smoke from a distant fire, and the trees creaked quietly in the backyard. Ava suddenly asked if there were security cameras, said it was good to know in case something happened. She smiled that off too, but Kayla could feel her stomach tighten. Back inside, Ava asked to use the bathroom and disappeared upstairs. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Kayla called out, but got no answer. The house was completely still except for the low rumble of the heater kicking on. When Kayla finally went upstairs to check, the hallway lights were off and the bathroom door was wide open. The mirror was fogged up like someone had run hot water, but the faucet was dry. Ava's bag was still downstairs. Kayla's own bedroom door was half closed now, when she was sure she had left it open. She stepped slowly toward it. The carpet felt colder than it should have. Her heart was beating way too hard in her chest. Every sound felt amplified. The soft rustle of her hoodie, the creak in the floorboards, her own breathing. She pushed the door open with her fingertips. The room was empty, but something about it felt wrong. The curtains were drawn open and the window was unlocked. On her desk, one of the drawers was hanging halfway out, and her spare house key was missing. A second later, she heard the front door creak open, then soft footsteps moving through the living room. Kayla didn't move. Her throat felt tight and her legs were like stone. The footsteps stopped, then there was silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful, the kind that feels like the air itself is listening. Kayla backed away from the door without making a sound. Her socks slid slightly on the floor as she turned and slipped into the upstairs bathroom, easing the door shut behind her until it clicked softly. She locked it, the cold porcelain of the tub pressed against her knees as she crouched behind the shower curtain, heart racing so hard it made her chest ache. Downstairs, something scraped across the floor, a sharp, dragging sound. Then the unmistakable creak of the bottom stair. Each step after that came slowly and deliberately. The weight behind them was too heavy to be Ava. Whoever it was paused halfway up. Kayla held her breath until her lungs burned. Her phone was downstairs, her charger too. She had nothing, not even the strength to scream if she wanted to. The footsteps resumed. They reached the top. She could hear them shifting direction, carpeted feet brushing softly across the hallway. Then silence. A few seconds passed. Then a whisper. It was quiet, but clear. A man's voice calling her name like he already knew exactly where she was. Like this wasn't a guess. The doorknob rattled gently, once, then twice, then stopped. Kayla's whole body went rigid. Her mouth was dry. Her fingers dug into the shower curtain to steady herself. Suddenly, something slammed against the door, hard enough to make the mirror fall and shatter across the tiles. She screamed. The handle shook violently now. The frame groaned under the pressure. She could hear his breathing. Fast, aggressive, excited. Then came Ava's voice, calm, on the other side of the door, telling him to stop. She said it in a flat tone like she wasn't scared, like this was just part of the plan. Kayla heard them arguing, low and fast. Then a loud crash, and running. Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. The front door slammed open. Then nothing, just her own breathing and the sound of the broken mirror crunching under her as she finally opened the door. Downstairs, the living room was torn apart. One of the lamps was smashed, and the front door stood wide open. On the coffee table sat Ava's phone, unlocked. A message thread was still open. Dozens of texts from someone saved only as a number. Most of them were location updates. One of them said back door is unlocked. Another said she's in the room across from the stairs. The last one just read, make it quick. Kayla never saw Ava again after that night. The police came. They took statements. They dusted for prints. Nothing came back. No matches, no known accomplice. Just a blurry figure caught on a neighbor's security camera, disappearing into the woods behind her house. Ava's parents claimed she had run away years ago. That was the part that stayed with Kayla the most. The realization that Ava had not been enrolled in their school. Her name wasn't in the system. Her photo was never in the yearbook. No one else remembered her. For weeks afterward, Kayla couldn't sleep without leaving the bathroom light on. Every creak in the floor made her heart lurch. She started locking her bedroom door even when her parents were home. Sometimes at night, she thought she heard someone walking through the grass just beyond her window. Not loud, just a slow, dragging shuffle across the lawn. One morning she found a small smudge on the outside of her bedroom window, as if someone had pressed their forehead against the glass and stayed there, watching. The spare key was never found. The police said maybe the man took it. Maybe he threw it somewhere. Kayla started noticing little things around the house that felt slightly off. The laundry door open when it shouldn't be. The basement light on after everyone had gone to bed. Her toothbrush was damp once before she even touched it. Nothing ever happened again. But nothing ever felt normal again either. The police never found out who the man was, or how Ava knew so much about Kayla's house. Her name wasn't real. Her records didn't exist. But someone still had that spare key, and something kept setting off the motion light in the backyard. It was late November, and the hallways at Brighton High were already starting to smell like wet coats and cheap hand sanitizer. Julian was a senior and spent most of his free periods helping out in the band room. He liked the quiet down there, the muffled sound of footsteps upstairs, the faint smell of brass polish and old wood. One Friday afternoon, his music teacher asked if he could organize the basement storage before Thanksgiving break. It sounded easy enough. The place was dusty and a little cramped, but familiar. He had been in and out of there for years. That day the air felt heavier though, like it had been sitting too long. Like something had been waiting in the stillness. Julian flicked on the basement lights and stepped carefully down the narrow wooden stairs. The steps creaked under his weight, and the air grew colder with each one. At the bottom, the light buzzed overhead, but barely reached the far corners of the room. Old music stands leaned against the walls like folded skeletons. A cracked leather drum case sat open near the door, empty. The storage room smelled like mildew and copper. He started sorting boxes onto metal shelves, dragging one-labeled reeds and mouthpieces to the side. About 10 minutes in, he heard footsteps above him, slow and steady. He figured it was a teacher locking up, or maybe the janitor, but the footsteps stopped right at the top of the basement stairs. There was no knock, no call down, just silence. Then the lights flickered. Not a full outage, just enough to make his eyes adjust too fast. He stood there for a second, hands frozen on a stack of sheet music, waiting for whoever it was to say something. Nothing came. He cleared his throat and called out. Still nothing. He walked to the stairs and looked up. No one. The hallway light above was off now. He swore it had been on when he came down. Shaking it off, he went back to stacking, but something had shifted. A music book that had been on top of a case was now on the floor. He hadn't touched it. He picked it up and turned slowly. Behind one of the larger shelves, something scraped softly against the concrete. A dragging sound, long and smooth. He stepped closer, but the shelf was too tall to see behind. He leaned slightly. Nothing, just empty space and a busted folding chair. Still, he couldn't shake the sense that he wasn't alone. His skin felt prickly. His breath sounded too loud in the still air. Just as he bent down to grab another box, he heard a voice, faint, just one word, his name. It came from the back of the room in a low tone, like it had been spoken right next to his ear but from behind a wall. Julian stood up fast and scanned the room. Still no one. He moved toward the back where old timpani drums and broken risers were piled. The light buzzed again and flickered once more. His shadow jumped across the far wall in a jagged shape that did not match his movement. He turned. Nothing was there, but one of the cabinets had been left open, and inside it was a folded hoodie that looked exactly like the one he had left in his locker upstairs. His stomach sank. He took a step back. From somewhere deeper in the basement, a door creaked. One he didn't remember being there before. Just past the boiler, near the breaker panel. It slowly opened an inch, then stopped. The gap was just wide enough to see darkness behind it. No sound, no movement, just the faint smell of something old and sour pushing into the air. Julian didn't breathe. He just stared, until something inside that darkness shifted and stepped forward. Julian didn't wait. He spun and sprinted toward the stairs. The old boxes crashed behind him as something heavy moved in the dark. He could hear it now. Not just footsteps, but the scrape of skin against concrete, like something crawling half upright, dragging itself through the dust. He reached the bottom step and grabbed the railing. The wood felt damp and sticky. A sharp, sour smell hit his nose. He looked down and saw a streak of something dark smeared along the edge of the handrail. It was still wet. He bolted up the stairs 2 at a time. At the top, he slammed into the door and twisted the handle, but it didn't move. It wasn't just stuck. It was locked from the outside. He pounded on it with his fists and shouted, but his voice felt swallowed by the thick air. Behind him, something groaned low and guttural. Not human. Not quite. The temperature in the stairwell dropped so fast his breath started to fog. He turned and looked back into the basement. There, in the weak glow of the flickering light, stood a man in a custodian's uniform, or what looked like one. The face didn't fit. The mouth was too wide and the eyes were too still. No blinking, just staring directly at Julian like it had been waiting all day for him to turn around. The thing started walking, not fast, just steady, deliberate. As it moved, it dragged something behind it that clicked softly across the floor. A ring of old keys. Julian threw his shoulder into the door again. Then again. On the third hit, the lock gave way and the door burst open. He stumbled into the hall and slammed it shut behind him. He ran straight into someone standing near the lockers. It was the real janitor, Mr. Rios, eyes wide, confused. Julian spun and pointed at the basement door, but it was completely dark behind him. No sound, no movement. The lights were off, like the power had never been on to begin with. Mr. Rios looked past him and said no one had been down there all day. He said the basement had been locked since morning. Julian turned back. The hallway was dead silent now, but down at the very end near the double doors, a shadow slipped slowly out of sight. Something tall, something wearing a familiar uniform, and something still holding that ring of keys. Julian never went back into the basement after that. He avoided the music wing completely, transferred out of band a week later, and told everyone it was just burnout. Nobody pushed for more, but some days he would catch himself staring at the utility door at the end of the hallway, the one near the boiler room. It always stayed shut now. No one ever used it. Yet sometimes he swore he could hear a slow shuffle behind it. Not loud, just the kind of movement that doesn't want to be heard, but slips through anyway. At home, he started waking up around the same time every night, always just past 2 a.m. No dreams, just the feeling that someone had been watching him sleep and stepped out of the room a second before he opened his eyes. He started checking the locks twice, sometimes 3 times. Even then, he'd find little things moved. A lamp unplugged, a chair angled toward his bed. On his last day before winter break, he found something taped to the inside of his locker. Just a single yellow slip of paper with one word written in faded black ink. It was his name. Below it was a small rusted key. He threw it away without touching it. That night, the school's alarm system triggered without explanation. Police responded but found nothing inside. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows. But on the floor, just outside the band room, they found a single dusty footprint leading out of the darkness. Too large to be a student's, too fresh to be from before. No one ever claimed the key left in Julian's locker. Security footage showed nothing. The basement remained sealed, but the air near that hallway always felt colder than the rest of the school. And sometimes at night, the janitor swore he still heard a second set of keys. It was just after 8 on a Thursday night, and the sky was already dark enough to feel like midnight. Caleb had stayed late for track practice after his ride home bailed last minute. The school lot was empty except for a few flickering lights and the hum of vending machines echoing near the gym doors. His phone was at 4%, and the bus had stopped running an hour ago. That was when Mason pulled up, a senior he barely knew who offered him a lift without much explanation. Said he lived nearby. The car smelled faintly like cologne and burnt plastic. Caleb hesitated for a second, then climbed in. The door closed with a soft thud that felt louder than it should have in the quiet. As soon as Caleb buckled his seatbelt, the car eased out of the lot and turned onto the main road. The headlights barely reached the edges of the shoulder, and the interior lights stayed off. Mason said almost nothing at first. Just tapped his fingers against the steering wheel to the rhythm of a song that wasn't playing. Caleb gave him his address, but Mason took a different turn without reacting, said it was faster this way. Caleb glanced at his phone, but the battery icon blinked red, 2%. The further they drove, the quieter it got. No other cars, just the sound of tires rolling over cracked asphalt and the occasional rustle of leaves blowing across the road. The streetlights thinned out until there were none. They passed a shuttered gas station. Its windows were boarded, and the canopy lights flickered dimly like they were struggling to stay alive. Mason suddenly asked if Caleb lived with both parents. His voice was flat like he was reading from a list. Caleb gave a short answer and tried to change the subject. But Mason kept going, asked if they had a dog, asked if his house had a garage. Then he smiled but didn't look away from the road. The smile didn't match the tone of his voice. Caleb felt his hands start to sweat. The air in the car had gone stale, like the vents were pushing out recycled breath. He cracked the window a little, but it didn't help. The woods on either side of the road pressed in closer now. trees almost touching the glass. Mason said the shortcut cut behind some old trails. Caleb had never heard of them. Then Mason reached over and turned down the music that had barely been audible to begin with. He slowed the car and pointed to a narrow dirt path cutting off to the right. No signs, no lights. He said this way was quicker and smiled again, but his eyes didn't move from the road. As they rolled onto the path, the tires crunched softly over gravel and leaves. The branches scraped the roof like fingernails. Caleb pretended to check a message and slipped his phone into his lap. 1%. No signal. The car slowed even more. Mason leaned forward like he was scanning the trees. Then he said they were almost there. Only he didn't say Caleb's street name. He didn't say anything familiar, just that it would be quiet, easier. Caleb's heart was pounding now. The seatbelt felt too tight, the air too thick. Then he saw it, a second car, parked just off the path. No lights, no plates. Someone sat in the driver's seat, but they didn't move. Not even when Mason flashed his brights. Just stared through the windshield like they were waiting. Caleb didn't look at Mason. He knew if he did, his face would give everything away. Instead, he said he was going to be sick, said he needed to get out before it happened. Mason didn't answer right away. Then he stopped the car. Slowly, Caleb opened the door before the tires fully stopped and stepped out into the cold. The night hit him hard, damp and sharp. He stumbled into the brush and ducked behind a thick patch of trees. He crouched low and held his breath. Behind him, he heard the driver's door shut, then silence. No footsteps, no voice. Just the wind moving through the trees like it was trying to whisper something. Caleb crouched in the underbrush with his heart slamming against his chest so hard it felt like it might shake the leaves around him. The cold dirt clung to his palms as he pressed himself lower to the ground. The woods were dead quiet, not even bugs. He strained to hear where Mason had gone, but the only thing he caught was the soft crunch of gravel from the other car. A door creaked open, then nothing. No voices, no footsteps. Just the sound of something large shifting in the dark, like weight being slowly moved from one side to the other. He waited. His legs started to cramp, but he stayed frozen. Something brushed past the brush to his left. Not close, but close enough. The sound was slow and deliberate, like someone dragging their fingers along the bark of the trees as they walked. Then another sound, a faint whistle, off-key. It wasn't coming from Mason. It was deeper, lower. Caleb risked a glance between the tree branches. Mason was walking slowly around his car, head tilted slightly, like he was listening for something. He wasn't calling out. He didn't look confused. He looked focused. The figure from the other car was gone. The door hung open. Without warning, Mason stopped and looked directly into the trees, right where Caleb was hiding. His eyes didn't scan. They locked in immediately, like he had known the whole time. Then he said Caleb's name. Calm, even. Caleb bolted. He ran deeper into the woods. Branches clawed at his face. Roots nearly took his legs out, but he didn't stop. Behind him came the sound of two people running. One set heavier, the other fast and light. They didn't yell. They just chased. The forest was pitch black now. Only faint stars through the canopy. Caleb spotted a gap between the trees and sprinted toward it, slipped through a fence that was half collapsed and found himself on the edge of a service road. Headlights appeared in the distance. A truck. Old. Loud. He stumbled into the road, waving his arms. The truck braked hard, and the driver jumped out ready to yell until he saw Caleb's face, covered in sweat and dirt and panic. Behind them, the forest was still, the tree line empty. But the sound of something pacing just beyond the dark kept going, even after the truck pulled away. Even after Caleb looked back one last time, there was a figure standing at the edge of the woods, perfectly still, just watching, holding something small in its hand. It looked like a phone, the screen still lit, his lock screen glowing faintly from the distance. The truck driver dropped Caleb off at a gas station just outside town. He let him use the office phone to call his parents. but never asked what happened. Just watched him closely while lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. When Caleb's mom showed up, she didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. Just held him like she thought he might still vanish. They filed a report, gave the license plate number, but the police said it didn't match any records. No student named Mason fit the description. No car matching that make or model was registered in the county. When they checked the school's cameras from the parking lot, there was no footage of the car ever arriving, just Caleb walking out alone. That part haunted him the most. The feeling that someone had erased just enough of the truth to make him doubt his own memory. Weeks passed, but the unease never really left. Some nights he would hear soft crunching outside his window, like gravel under slow footsteps. One time he found the gate to the backyard unlatched, even though it was chained the night before. Another night his phone lit up at 3 a.m. No number, just a text. It said, "I told you it would be quiet." He stopped riding with anyone after that, stopped staying late at school, but he never stopped checking the woods when he walked past them. Always scanned the tree line. Always half expected to see that figure again. Not moving, not blinking, just waiting. The phone Caleb lost that night was never recovered, but someone kept using it. His location history showed pings from empty trails and dead zones hours after he got home, and every few nights the porch camera caught a figure standing just outside its range. Still, silent, watching.